You're a grown man! He's a robot cat! Pull yourself together! Seriously.
Hi. I'm Bobby. I am a robot cat. Welcome to my channel. My dear viewers, in the beginning of my YouTube journey, I created a 3-part series on Catherine Joy's claims she is a survivor of a religious organization or cult. Well, since then my channel has grown quite a bit, and many may not be familiar with this series. Also, I am working on a part 4. Since many of you rather enjoy my live chat, I thought we could revisit the entire documentary together. This is quite a long series, so grab appropriate amounts of spirits and catnip. This is a 2-part series entitled Katie and the interjecting to say it became a 3-part documentary as more archives became available. Cult. This part 1 is a reaction video to one that she uploaded 1 year ago. In this video she appears solo, she dramatically shares the story of how she accidentally ended up in a dangerous cult. Stay tuned tomorrow for part 2. Let us begin.
Guys, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Thanks for joining me. This will be a little bit of a different video because I just needed to get a few things off my chest. Yesterday I did a video where I shared a side-by-side of a video that was done by Jacqueline Glenn and then another one that was a response by a woman named Morgan.
Spoiler alert, she is about to insert herself into someone else's I joined a cult story. Let us get to it.
Because what better place to actually get things done than to make a video and call out your friends. No, just kidding anyways. So, I have to be honest, and this is where we're going to get offside tracked. But I knew people like Paul and Morgan not too long ago. Like seriously. And like within the last few years.
What the fuck do you keep looking at?
And I was involved with a church that was similar to what they probably go to. Maybe not the same. I would say the version that I was in was a lighter version of what they have, but it's all packaged. It might be packaged differently with the sermons being a shorter period of time and maybe the pastor that I had not being as controversial in what he said, but the underlying sentiment and the underlying doctrine was the same.
This sounds like most organized religion. After all, they do all believe in the same basic creator. Do pay attention to this. It will matter in part 2.
Because my pastor came from a Pentecostal upbringing. Now, I came from a Catholic upbringing, and I spent my entire life in the Catholic Church with my family, my grandparents. My mother went to Catholic school. My grandparents were very involved in their local Catholic church, Holy Family. I attended Mass and Catechism at a church called St. John's. I was baptized, first, confirmation.
Catherine, why are you trying to convince us all you were Catholic?
All the way up communion. I mean, I did everything, right? And my confirmation was kind of the end for me because after all of that time, I decided to become a member of the church. I went through the entire teaching and I realized I didn't like it. The more I learned about the church, the more I learned about the practices, the more I learned about the doctrine, the more I learned about the hierarchy, Rome, the Pope, the saints, all of it. I just didn't agree with it. I didn't agree with the way women were treated. I didn't agree with the way that it was handled in my family. I didn't agree with the way it divided my family. My grandparents were very steadfast in their belief until the very end. And my mom and her sisters, they kind of rejected it. And as they rejected it, it became an issue within our family. And it ultimately divided the family to a point where my grandmother would only, every time we were together, would always talk to us about why we weren't in church, reminding us why we need to be in church. And even at my grandfather's funeral, made some statements that just weren't very flattering about what happened to him and why he passed away. And
You appear to be quite bitter. Although, I am rather confused as to why you are not sharing your priest story in your explanation for leaving the Catholic Church. One would assume that were a large factor.
It's messy, right? And so going through that experience, I never wanted to get back involved in a church. And I was thinking about this because for a long time I just stayed in this place where I was like, I don't know what I believe. I'm not sure. I think there's something, but there's not. And I did a lot of exploring. I was like into rocks for a while. I meditated. I was into yoga. I read about Taoism and Hinduism and all the different Eastern philosophies. And I got to this place where it's like, well, there's so many different beliefs in the world. How is there one that's true? And so
Rocks and yoga classes do not pass for religion, Catherine. But I do believe I understand the point. At this point you do not want to return to Christianity. Fair enough.
I just sort of came to a place where I just was like, I don't believe anything. And then my husband's mother got sick, and then my uncle got sick, and then our family got really rattled by my son's health. And I ended up feeling very vulnerable and very alone. We had just moved to this like sort of rural community where it was great because we could have a larger home and a really good school system for my son, but I didn't have a lot of friends because everyone around us was in church. And so
What do you mean? You had no friends due to all of them being in church? Do you mean that they would not befriend your family if you would not attend their church? An entire neighborhood? Or do you mean they were in church literally 24 hours per day?
So I maybe indirectly dealing with the grief of what was going on in my family and with my son was seeking something. I needed a community. I needed something. I needed a place to go. And I needed a sense of I would have support. I would have friendship. I would have kinship. I would have people that were like-minded. I could connect to and feel a sense of community. Like I was longing for that during that time. And so the only thing that they had out here were churches. And I was like, well, I were in the city. I could do, different social events. They just don't have that here. So more and more.
You act as though you live in a small hut, on a mountain, in the desert. You do not seem to have any troubles commuting to cosmetic stores and plastic surgeons. But, do continue.
I was talking to people in the community, and a couple people brought up this one church, and you should just check it out. It'll be very different. I was very reluctant because of what I went through in Catholic, growing up in my Catholic faith, and I was like, I don't want to do another church. But one of my friends told me about this place. I checked this out. I went on the website. Everything looked very different. The sermons were packaged in a way where it was like you wrote out. It was like a self-help booklet every day for the week with questions and a study guide. And
well, that doesn't sound too culty.
the sermons were taking verses from the Bible and sort of packaging them into a way to help you live a better life, which is really not how the Bible was written. If you know the Bible, it's not designed to be a self-help book, but rather the Word of God. But the way that they packaged it,
I imagine you apply the Bible to life in order to approve life. You daft woman.
felt like you were taking what the Bible said and using how to implement it. It felt like going to school and having a section where you studied, and then here's the verses, and this is how you apply it. It felt like being a psychology class, and I enjoyed that. And not really thinking about how the verses in context meant or what the actual Bible said, I had read the Bible, but when you're Catholic, some of us don't really read it because the priests go through it in Mass, and you every year it's like they go through the books, and everything is very controlled in the Catholic Church. And while some people are very reading their Bibles and stuff, there's a lot of those Catholics that just don't. They just rely on the priests and the community, right? So
you have a very biased and bitter recollection of
this
this.
was a different experience for me, like really getting into the Word, really getting into the Bible. And I went to my first service there, and it was like I can't even describe it. I remember I walked in, and it was like at a high school or middle school, and it was loud. There was like loud music, which was very different.
So far, this sounds more like a bad review for a single church. Not like a cult survival story at all.
I grew up with hymns, sitting, kneeling, and organs. And this was rock bands, and people had hot coffee, and they were dressed really hipster, and like cute skinny jeans, and women that had super cute tops on, and lots of cute makeup, and not enough makeup, but just not a ton of makeup, but just enough, and cute clothing that was stylish yet modest, and everyone was.
Are you claiming Catholics do not drink hot coffee or wear makeup? How many years had it been since you'd been to church? You are trying to recreate a childhood as a fundamental Christian. You are not. Catholics wear nice
really
clothes and makeup, Catherine.
And I was at a spot in my life where I needed that, and I remember walking in feeling like, oh my God, I don't have to be alone. And I sat through my first service, and I cried because it had been such a long time since I'd been in any sort of church. And I remember feeling guilty because that's what you do when you're Catholic. And I remember feeling like I want to have this feeling again. I just want to keep having that feeling. I don't know that I wanted to believe. I just wanted to have that feeling.
Dear viewers, she is setting a scene as a brittle and broken lost soul who was fooled by charms of a cult. I assure you, tomorrow's part 2 will be a stark comparison to this mild-mannered recollection.
Because I felt so alone for such a long time. And suddenly I found myself invested and involved in this group. I didn't know anything about their doctrine, very limited. Their website was it gave you enough without giving you much. And that's how a lot of these websites and a lot of these sort of rock band churches work, where you feel like you're walking into a modern place where there's modern thoughts and modern feelings, and you won't have to deal with the guilt or the shame or the judgment that comes along with some forms of Christianity. And so I thought I would be safe there. I thought I would make friends there. I thought I could maybe rediscover and explore my faith. And somehow, I don't know how this happened, because I always credited myself for being a very logical, pragmatic thinker, critical thinker.
It sounds as though your glaringly obvious need for attention and control got the best of you.
I got really invested, and I was going to groups all of the time, and I was going to women's groups and Bible studies and home churches, and I was volunteering. And initially what it looked like on the surface was a group of people that were in life together, doing life together.
Now wait. Did you not just say that you joined the church because your young son was dealing with his medical fragility, and you needed support? Were you taking a severely medically fragile child on all of these carpools and Bible studies?
Helping people, supporting one another, helping people live throughout and be their best selves, and without the guilt of, am I going to be part of something that is anti-LGBTQ plus? Am I going to be something that's in a system that is patriarchal and anti-women? Those were my biggest concerns. And
having seen my share of your overbearing personality, I find it quite hard to believe you did not address these things from the jump.
And for a while, I was able to ignore things. And then I learned pretty quickly that the pastor, over time, I learned that he came from a Pentecostal background. And he had grown up in the Assemblies of God. And they are very charismatic. They speak in tongues. They're very strict. He grew up not drinking alcohol. He and his wife were saved themselves. I don't even know if they kissed before they got married. His children were homeschooled. He and all of their friends homeschooled.
So, you researched the preacher after becoming so involved in the church. And you made a decision about the preacher, based on the way in which he was raised. Carry on.
Ingrained in this, and I started looking around me, and I realized every single person in my life was homeschooling their kids. Many of them were very critical of the government. They were apprehensive when they discussed politics, but they were very adamant about their beliefs. People that I never would have been friends with before, who were against people in the LGBTQ plus, became my friends. People that were anti-choice, which was something I was very not okay with. I had always been a pro-choice kind of girl. And people that were anti-education and suspicious of the public schools, which was crazy to me because my mom was a teacher and my father was on the school board.
Wait, you mean for me to believe that you became such close friends with these churchgoers, and you had no idea that they would have relatively broad and common Christian beliefs? I still fail to see where the word cult applies to this.
I worked in public health my whole life, and so I was a girl that was all about the public schools. I went to public high school. I went to the public university. I mean, I was all about being secular. And I started watching myself slowly morphing into this thing that I didn't understand. And I started becoming suspicious of school because everyone around me was homeschooling. But everyone didn't look like what I thought. I imagined homeschoolers in the Christian world to be like what you see on the Duggars, right? And I imagined the bigotry to be not in a church like that, but it was there. I remember sitting at...
Wow. So you believe that not only are all parents who homeschool their children extremely modest dressing, but you believe only Christians homeschool their children. Wow.
At a sermon. And my pastor basically saying that men and women should not be friends, and men should be the leader of the church, of the family, and that women must submit to their husbands, and that husbands should not, look online at certain things, and women and men should be very careful about what they do online. And he often talked about how, if you're married and you are friends with another person of the opposite sex, you are basically committing adultery, and men should watch their wives. And it was all packaged in a way where you felt like what you were hearing wasn't what it was. I don't know how to say that, but...
Well, I will tell you how you would say that. I am not even a Christian, and I can see that this is a grossly exaggerated situation. If you did not agree with the teachings of this very public church, then leave.
It was very old school, let's just say, but yet presented in a way where it didn't feel that way, so you didn't really know what you were hearing. It's hard to explain. But suddenly I started following around my husband, who I'd never been in a situation where I was like, yes, I must submit to you, and demanding that he lead the family. You need to be our leader. You need to come to church too. And I got him involved, and I start working on getting my son in homeschooling. And
oh, come on now, Catherine. That poor bastard is the leader of nothing. It would be safe to assume that you monitor when the man can take a piss.
I'm making bone broth because I'm scared of all of the chemicals, and suddenly we're questioning medicine, and everything that I had once been so steadfast knowing that was okay, I suddenly found myself in an alternate universe.
During all of this, you had an extremely medically complicated baby. So, you mean to tell me that you were questioning medicine because this alleged cult made you do that? Never mind.
And even when I was in the Catholic Church, this didn't happen, at all. At all. I realized that indirectly I got involved with a church that was all about the Spirit and the Spirit moving within you and controlling you and having a relationship with the Spirit, but not speaking in tongues. So very Pentecostal-like without the tongue speaking.
Did you really just mean to say that Catholics do not focus on the Spirit? Do you truly believe that your viewers are this fucking stupid?
And it was very much people constantly talking about the Holy Spirit working within them, speaking through them, guiding them to do things, moving them towards things. And everyone was always very, wanting to pray over people. I mean, prayer circles where people were like putting their hands on people. It was very different than what I grew up in.
So far, nothing you have shared would lead me to believe you are a victim of a cult. This merely seems to be a church that was not the right fit for you. Quite possibly a situation where you were a raging witch, and lost friends much like you do in every other aspect of your life.
Was very weird, and the people that knew me in my life were very taken aback by this sort of presentation, because what I was starting to espouse and say and talk about, I mean, my feed on Facebook and on Twitter at the time, it was all about God, and I was writing passages and I was sharing Psalms and Proverbs, and I was listening to Bethel music and Hillsong. And if you know anything about
this, simply sounds to me like you embraced your newfound venture, not a cult.
Bethel, I mean, come on, I was rocking to Bethel music, and this is like a faith healing church. I didn't even know that that's what they did, but that's what we listened to at church. And it didn't even hit me until it was a very slow process where I found myself more and more falling away from myself and getting more and more surrounded. And the further I got in, the more the church wanted from me. So,
Catherine, is this the point in which you try to create the illusion that you had to somehow escape this church in your small Minnesota town?
It was, make sure that you're volunteering, make sure that you're tithing at least, X%, make sure that you're involved in your groups. And so it got to a point where I was at church on Sundays, groups on Mondays, groups on Wednesdays. I did youth group for a while. I was doing Meals on Wheels with them. I was volunteering. I was helping with getting Sunday school stuff ready.
Where was the baby then?
I was walking people and greeting people at church and taking their kids to Sunday school. I was leading Bible studies. I somehow got into this position where I don't even know. All I remember wanting was community, and I suddenly was so deep into something that I didn't even know what it was.
Judging by your behavior online as a crackerbox reporter, you seem to always overinvest yourself and include yourself in whatever your current interest is at the time. This is not shocking at all.
And the only friends that I had anymore were within the church, and they were like, yes, just hang out with your friends. Yes, just hang out with us. Make your community here. Don't worry about the outside.
Wait, did you not just say at the start of this video that you had just moved there and had no friends at all? And the only potential friends were part of the church.
I didn't even know what it was. And the only friends that I had anymore were within the church. And they were like, yes, just hang out with your friends. Yes, just hang out with us. Make your community here. Don't worry about the outside world. Your family is here. And it was presented in such a way that you didn't even think about how you might be starting to isolate yourself from everyone else around you, because your beliefs are kind of I remember just being like, God is with me everywhere. Just I felt intoxicated by the Spirit.
Well, I suppose it is better than 4 bottles of wine each day.
That's what it was, which is kind of how the Pentecostal church works. And you feel so drunk on it that you just want it all the time, even though it's not, I don't even know if it's real. But I remember my parents just being like, I don't even know who you are. One of my best friends was just like, who are you? And
Wait, I thought you had said that your parents were strict parents and strict Catholics. So much so that your father beat you. Do you not remember saying that, Catherine?
Going to family events and feeling like I was better than everyone because I was at church, going to Bible studies and dissecting what everyone else was doing out in the world that wasn't Christian or wasn't walking in our faith, criticizing people, analyzing how they're not being like God.
Oh. So the same exact thing you do now. Except to Christians.
And I started to realize slowly but surely that everything that I had once held dear to me, because the pastors said you don't need college education, you don't need public schools, women, you don't need to work out of the home. I quit my job during this time, mind you. Yeah, I did. I became a stay-at-home mom. That was never my plan.
Do you truly just completely forget the lies that you tell? I thought you quit your job before this. I thought you left your job to be this wonderful stay-at-home mother to your medically fragile child.
Husbands don't have friends with, don't be friends with men. Let your husband sleep. I mean, I became like Betty Homemaker. It was like I was in the Twilight Zone. And I remember one day feeling really disenchanted because I noticed after a couple of years that everything in the church got weirder and weirder. The pastor, I think he got into an argument with one of the other pastors and kicked him out, but it was very abruptly. And I remember I sat down with the pastor that left, and he just said, I want to be a part of a church that does more for the community.
Wait. But you just gave us an entire list of all of the community service you were doing on behalf of the church.
And I was like, because this church always said that we were doing things for the community. And then I started to think about it, and I was like, wait a minute. What do we do for the community? Nothing. Anytime they had something to do for the community, like backpacks for kids, where you would get a backpack for like a kid and that couldn't afford it, or say like a Christmas tree where you give gifts to kids or families that you like sponsor a child, the church never sponsored it. We did. So a church would just coordinate it, and then we paid for everything.
Oh, I am beginning to see the direction this is heading.
They had different events that we could volunteer for that were for other events, but the church didn't pay for it or sponsor it. So there wasn't really a community outreach, in fact, at all. There wasn't any sort of services set up for families. There was nothing set up for families, for children with special needs. There was no services or support for women or really for anything. And
Catherine, this entire video reads like a negative Google business review. None of this equates to being the survivor of a cult.
Which was very different, because if you think about the Catholic Church, it's very, they have the Catholic charities. So when he said that, I started to look inward and I thought, oh my God, there is nothing going on here. Like, what are we doing? And then when family members or people were struggling, I noticed that within the community that nobody was helping these people. So when...
How much money did they deny you when you requested it? She goes on for some time, over-focused on money. Let us continue on to her story of leaving this victimizing, evil cult.
When a member of the church was struggling financially or something, the church wasn't offering to help them, or if they did, it was very minimal. And I remember sitting there listening to the pastor, and he was talking about how he wanted to build this humongous church, and he got jealous of other pastors who were able to build such successful churches, and that, he would see them in their cars and he would want those cars, but he would say, I'm not going to have one of those cars. I'm not going to do that. You'll never have to worry about it. You'll never have to worry about, what I take for this, what I take for that. But during this time, they decided they wanted to build a church because we were still staying in that, middle school. And
was it not a high school?
Disclosures for the money was so bizarre. Like, we didn't know what people were making. We were just supposed to know the pastor's wife was doing the books, which seemed weird to me. They started asking us for not only tithing, but a percentage on top of that to pledge to help them build this building. So more and more the demands for money got higher and higher and higher, with no sort of understanding about where the money was going and what it was going to, because the money, they didn't have that many expenses at the time, and the money was not going back to the community at this point because they weren't doing outreach or any sort of charity. And they kept saying, well, we'll do more charity once we get there. The only goal that this church had was to bring more people to Jesus. So that's all he wanted, was to save you. And then once you got there, there was nothing there.
Why do I have a horrid feeling that you try to infiltrate their financial information, and in doing so cause some sort of turmoil between yourself and the church? And why, Catherine, would any of this be your business? This is not a cult, Catherine. If you were not happy, then leave.
The sermon was the same all the year after year. They did the same series over and over and over again, because they said that they just had to keep making it highlight and easy for people to come in. And then they wanted you to help them bring people in, invite your friends, make sure they come here. And then once you got there, there was this sort of emptiness of what next, right?
This sounds more like the complaints of a narcissist with control issues.
And you start becoming part of this machine, and you're slowly separating yourself from everyone around you. And then you've got a pastor that has no accountability. There's no denomination around him, no rules. He kicks out the other pastor. And then, drunk on power, anytime one of the members says to him, what about these? Could you do something different here? Could we add services here? Or could we do this? Or could we do that? It was always met by, if this is not how you like it, you can leave. This is my church, and this is what we're going to do. And I remember asking him one time, like, how do people become pastors? Like, what is what are the credentials, or what is the process? And he went through a program in the Pentecostal church, mind you. And so but there was no females that were leading. And although we would never say it, that was
You are truly reaching to insert yourself into the fundamental Christian victim narrative.
Very understood that women were not to be pastors. And so slowly I realized that I had joined almost like a cult. But I remember this sort of come to realization with my husband, and I said, I can't do this anymore. We were 3 years in, we were thousands of dollars of donations and tithing and hours of sweat and tears of volunteering. And I remember saying to him, I think we're like in a cult. And
wait. You said they had no outreach programs.
It was the craziest experience. Like I left. We left. And it wasn't like we had to flee for our lives, but we lost everything. It was insane. We had become isolated from all of our outside friends because we had ingrained and sculpted our life around these group of people, assuming that if we left, it wouldn't be a big deal. These people would still be our friends. We had spent so much time with them. They were going to be there for us. That's what this was about, right? Wrong. When I started voicing my concerns and my doubts, it was met with, you can't leave.
Catherine, we all are well aware of the lack of self-control you have when voicing your own concerns. It is much more likely they told you to get the fuck out.
But I also know that sometimes when people are so heavy in something, they just need a bit of kindness. And so I realized that earlier today I did a video where I shared my conversation with Morgan, and everyone thought, oh, you're subscribing to her, you're co-signing what she believes, you're taking her side. And I was like thinking, no, I'm not taking her side. I'm just being a human and offering a little bit of compassion and saying, if we want to help someone open their mind, the best thing that we can do is be kind to them and not remind them all of the bad things they've said.
Oh, you can fuck right off, Catherine. Let us move into part 2. Welcome to part 2 of Katie and the Cult. Much gratitude for those who tuned into part 1. Before I begin, it seems a small group of detractors from Catherine world doth protest too much. First of all, I would appreciate you urchins discontinue referring to me as a reporter. I am not a reporter. I am a fucking commentary cat. One more note, is Catherine Joy can play and commentate on videos originating from the Duggars? Then I have every afforded right to commentate on this public story, and offer my questions and opinions. Never mind. We left off in part 1, which was premiered on Catherine's channel on 26th of February of 2020. We continue to a stream from 7th of March, same year. Titled My Hubby and I Tell the Story of How We Joined the Cult. Please keep the previous video in your mind's eye, as we continue.
Where I got involved in a rock band, sort of evangelical Pentecostal light cult.
Rock.
Yes, rock.
Catherine, the hand gesture was not because you said rock. I am assuming the hand gesture was due to the use of the term cult. Do go on.
And my husband, who, when we first met, sit up.
I am sitting up.
No, like.
You understand my legs are a lot longer.
I know, but you're blurry. You're blurry.
I know. Here,
Wow. It appears none of that submission the cult forced you to practice kept with you very long at all.
Okay.
See, now I look like a monster.
You don't look like a monster.
Okay.
Okay, we're having some technical issues, you guys. I'm just trying to direct him, and he's just like.
How's that?
That's better. Let me just maybe.
Good God. Get on with it.
Okay. Are you seriously trying to do that with your eyeballs right now? Okay. Stop it. You're so ridiculous. Okay. So back in 2015, I persuaded my husband to go to the cult with me, although I didn't know it was a cult at the time.
He looks as bamboozled as I.
And my husband's mom was in the middle of battling kidney cancer.
Yeah. I mean, it started out as kidney cancer, but by the time
It
by the
metastasized.
time it was caught, it was in her brain, and
Right. Yeah. Okay. So Ardell, his mother, got sick, and so did my uncle, Chuck, and they both did they both pass away relatively? It's pretty close to each other.
I think Chuck die spring.
He was in December, I think.
Oh, okay.
Was he? I don't remember. It was such a blur. Anyway,
Why are you laughing?
my uncle got sick, who was my my aunt's husband, and it was my aunt's husband that my mom was the closest to. So it was the uncle that I was around the most as a child, and I was really close to his sons. And he had vascular disease, and then he passed away, and he was only just over like in his very early 60s. And then Todd's mother ended up getting she developed kidney cancer, but by the time that it was caught or actually found, she had had a seizure, and they did a scan in the hospital, and they had found lesions on her brain.
Yep.
This is quite sad. I apologize for adding this bit. I feel it necessary to refrain from removing any portions of this.
And so by the time they diagnosed her, it was in her lungs, her kidneys, her brain,
And soft tissue.
and her soft tissue. So it was stage 4 when she was finally diagnosed. And she had a very, very grim prognosis at that point.
6 months, I think.
Yeah. And I think from the time that she was diagnosed until the time that she ultimately passed away, it wasn't even a year.
A quite important part of this would be how it aligns with timeline. Keep this in mind as we continue.
I think it was around 10 months.
10 months. I think she was diagnosed in August.
She died the
And she
following
died in June.
Yeah.
Yeah. So during that time, obviously, we had that going on. We were dealing with Todd's father, who was struggling with the magnitude of what we were facing, and
He didn't want her to be in any sort of facility. He wanted her
At home.
At home. He fought
tooth and
nail,
nail.
and
Yeah.
he finally did get to have her. She ended up passing away at home.
Right. And he
Rest her soul. We do not speak ill of the deceased, or black cat.
also like delayed hospice and put her through chemo that she didn't really want to go through, and it was just very hard. We had to have like advocacy meetings where the hospital kind of sat him down and had to help him understand the reality. He was just really struggling and put a lot of stress on all of us because we wanted to help him, but we also wanted to help him understand where we were at. I think a lot of us knew because she was a longtime smoker, and she was smoking up until the end of her life. And one of the outside of lung cancer, the second most common form of cancer that a smoker will be diagnosed with is kidney cancer. I had no idea.
Poor old chap seems quite a bit more affected by this.
And plus she was a heavy drinker.
Yeah.
As well.
Okay.
Also, we had only been living here for what, a couple of years.
Only a year. A year.
Living in this neighborhood that we live in now for.
It was actually less than a year that we
Yeah.
Yeah, it was less than a year that we lived here that she was diagnosed.
Give or take, yeah. And we've always sort of felt like interlopers since we've moved here.
Yeah, we don't belong.
I think Katie's talked about it before on the streams, but
We don't belong here at all.
yeah, it was.
What is in the corners of that flat? Both of you are continuously paranoid of the ceiling collapsing.
It was we were just kind of, I don't know, just kind of searching for some sort of belonging.
Yes, community.
For lack of a better word.
Right. We're like fish out of water here. There are days where I'm like, why do we even live here? But then I'm reminded that my son has an amazing school and I love my house. So those two reasons keep me here. So I ended up finding this church, and
Now, bear in mind that in part 1, she states she met locals and could not befriend them unless they were part of the church. She did not seek it out on her own. Small conflicted detail. Important nonetheless.
and when Todd and I first got married, when we first met, one of the first things he asked me was whether or not I was religious, and I was like, no. And he said, well, I can't marry someone that's religious. And I was like, okay, well, that's fine. I don't go to church. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And he was like, I'm an atheist. And I was like, that's great.
Heathenry, also termed heathenism, contemporary Germanic paganism, or Germanic neo-paganism, is a modern pagan religion. Scholars of religious studies classify it as a new religious movement. Developed in Europe during the early 20th century, its practitioners model it on the pre-Christian religions adhered to by the Germanic peoples of the Iron Age and early Middle Ages. Most heathens choose to actively honor a subset of gods with whom they have developed personal relationships, although offerings are also often made to all the gods and goddesses.
Yay! But apparently one of his girlfriends was kind of, I don't know, religious or something, and that was like an issue or something. I don't remember. No? Am I remember thinking things wrong? I don't know. That's irrelevant.
I just didn't want to
Speak up.
at my age when Katie and
Speak up.
when Katie and I met. Are we looking at
The microphone's right there,
I
but
know,
you need
but
to.
when Katie and I met,
Wow. There is simply no scenario in which you actually left the church because you are a controlling rat. None at all.
I was
Your voice
30,
is still low.
38, and at that point in my life, this is going to sound really bad, but I didn't want to have to deal with somebody who wasn't on my same political and I don't know, religious level or lack of religious level at that point.
You wanted to have shared common values.
Well, that is certainly interesting.
So,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah. So imagine his surprise when I decide we're going to go to church.
We dabbled in the dark arts.
We were never going to go to church. In fact, remember when we first had Vaughn and there was this...
Oh, that nurse.
Well, no. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how when we were looking for a daycare and there was one at a church and we were like, no, we will not support that. We will not pay a church to take care of our son because we didn't want the money to give money to a church.
Well, and
Aside from the glaring fact that what just fell out of your mouth was quite disgusting. Why would you take your immune-compromised baby to any public daycare, Catherine?
I didn't want him to be
Indoctrinated
at such a young age.
Right. Because even though it was a separate entity, the money and the supporting, we didn't want to support the church. Anyways, we go back, and this is not an anti-church stream. We're literally just sharing where we came from and where we were and how we got there.
Freedom of religion, baby.
So if you are a Christian, we are not hating you. If you're not a Christian, we are not hating you. We are sharing our experience.
If you're a heathen, we're
Yeah,
not loving
if
you.
you're
I thought you were an atheist, mate.
a heathen, if you're whatever, everyone is welcome here. What is not welcome here are chat comments telling my husband to leave the family. Okay, those will get deleted even if you are a member.
Is that why you got tripped up there for?
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, so where we're going to go from here is in February or in December, right before Christmas, 2014, I went to this church, I believe, maybe it was 2015.
February can either be a very long time before, or a short time after Christmas. Bloody hell.
I don't remember. But I went to this church and I was like convinced that this is where we needed to be because everyone was so nice. They had coffee. They pretended to be super amazing. They said they were super open, that they didn't judge anyone.
What is this deal with the coffee? Christians
that
drink
everyone was
coffee.
welcome. And it was all very like done in a way where you thought what you were getting was a progressive form of modern day Christianity, but it wasn't, right?
Catherine is about to figure out that this stream was a terrible idea.
Yeah, we soon we were able to lift the veil. We found the wizard behind the curtain.
Yeah. So when I did a stream a couple weeks ago, I talked about how we like got involved in this thing, how it took up all of our time, how I was volunteering. We were volunteering on Sundays. We were going to groups on Mondays. Sometimes we had 2 groups a week. I was doing women's group.
His body language feels as though some of this is quite new information.
You didn't do a men's group, did you? No, he didn't do a men's group. But it was like we were super invested, and then our friends were in this group, and then the pastor was always telling us to only be friends with the people in the group. And we would go to these groups at his house on Monday nights, right?
Yeah.
And it would be like, we're not going to judge you guys, but let's do a worksheet where we talk about how all the people that are out there are not doing the right form of Christianity and how they're not the right people and what you're doing better.
Can you elaborate?
That's literally what we did, right? Every week. There was a week, remember when we did the week about marriage, and it had to do with premarital sex, and the pastor was like, if you had a friend that was in their 30s and was decided to be intimate with a partner outside of marriage, what would you tell them about your thoughts about what they were doing? Do you remember that question?
I do not.
Oh my God.
Old chap seems to not know what in the fuck is going on at all. Just wait.
I almost lost my mind. I literally almost lost my mind. Like, are you seriously going to tell me that I have to tell my 35-year-old friend Betsy that she can't go get some because it's against God's will?
So you lost me. So 35-year-old Betsy, she's not married to anybody. There's no connection to anybody intimately, and she wants to go you know.
Yeah.
He is clearly hearing all of this for the first time. And her gritting of her horse teeth indicates she is terrified of what he may say to counter her victim
Yeah, you can't say
story.
that word.
You guys know what I'm talking about. But so basically, he was saying that as her friend,
The right thing would do would to tell her not to do that. So we were supposed to like tell people that were like consenting adults that it was not Christ-like.
I thought you had shared that Todd was very involved in church as well. And both of you adopted the submissive female to dominant male lifestyle. I thought you had said you both fell into the complete teachings. How does he not know what you're on about?
And I was like, are you effing kidding me? What if Betsy was married? And this is just a hypothetical Betsy. What if Betsy was married and she got a divorce and she already gave away her V card? What if Betsy just wanted to go get some fun and get some jollies off, and I'm going to call her up and be like, hey, Betsy, Jeremiah said that...
I would hope that Betsy would tell you that.
Yeah. So
The jump cuts are her own edits. Not mine. So wait, yesterday we viewed narrative of a cult member who was spoon-fed this philosophy without even realizing. Today, we are seeing an outrageous housewife who doth protest. So, which is it?
It's nobody's business, is what it is.
Oh, Betsy's in chat. Yeah, Betsy, we're not talking about you, but we love you, Betsy.
I'm married too.
So,
Betsy, do whatever you want.
yeah, Betsy, you go girl. You go get some. But this to me was so funny because there was people in the group that literally were like, I would tell Betsy not to do it. I would remind Betsy that when you do that, you are joining your souls and then you're leaving a little piece of yourself in that person that you can never get back, and that person is going to stay in you. And I was like,
The alarming contrast between your solo video in which you share this story as if you are forever damaged, and this quite animated retelling of a tale, coupled with your husband having absolutely no idea about any of this, is quite disturbing.
that's not how it works. What if Betsy doesn't even remember who Craig is next year? Like, Betsy might forget Craig, she might forget John, she might forget Steve, she might forget all of them.
What if she did the walk of shame all the way to church the next day?
Yeah.
Karen definitely does not like Betsy and her free will.
And that's between Betsy and Steve and Jim and Craig and all the guys that Betsy's hanging out with and whoever she's talking to upstairs. But that's like, I remember the questions got progressively more pushy about what we were supposed to tell people about God and how we were supposed to remind people how to live like God and how to be like God. And I noticed that our friends, when we were around them, that's all they talked about.
So, how long did this actually take? On 26 of February you claimed this took 3 years to come to realization. In this video, judging by your husband, that is not the case.
All of them. It was crazy. Like, no conversation was without. Then there was this period where he went through this time, and this was the part of it that I wanted to explain to you that was not... So one of the things that the Duggars talk about is, remember that Derek wrote this blog, and he had this rule that when he's in the office and a woman walks into...
Ah, I see. You forgot to insert yourself into the Duggar narrative in the beginning. Good catch, old bird.
The office, he keeps the door open, and he doesn't have private meetings with women out of respect for his wife.
Dude, turn off the porn.
I can't see that word.
Oh, sorry. Turn it off. That's not real life. That's
No.
That's not that like if the implication is that because he has a female in his office and the door is closed, that automatically, she's under the desk within 2 minutes.
Yeah.
That's not how life works.
Right.
You can see the wheels of jealous speculation turning in Catherine's black eyes.
People are ridiculous.
Hold on, let me just go to this point before you go there. But what I was thinking about was how Jeremiah, so that's what Derek Dillard said, right? And he's a fun to you guys. Well, Jeremiah, who was our pastor, he used to tell us that men and women should not be friends. And that men should not eat with women, married men should not eat with married women, married men and married women should not have any sort of conversation, unmarried women and married men should not speak, and unmarried men and married women should not speak. And you should not travel with an unmarried man if you're married, and vice versa. And you shouldn't be doing any of this, and you should never eat with them, you should never talk to them. You are
Todd's confusion is priceless.
not supposed to have a relationship with these people at all.
Actually, I don't even think it was necessarily married versus unmarried. It was don't be with the opposite sex unless your spouse and their spouse, if they happen to have a spouse, knows about it. And even if it's, let's say you have let's say there's a male that's a member of that church and they have a female colleague.
Yeah.
And they need to go to a different state.
Yeah.
Because there's a client that's mad and they got to go to this other state and they have to smooth things over with this client for whatever it is that they do for work.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah. Like if you traveled with your coworker who was of the opposite sex, therefore you're going to have an affair. Or, because he always say nobody plans to have an affair, so you need to plan how not to have an affair.
It almost sounds as if you had partaken in church-based marriage counseling.
How about you don't sexualize everything, Jeremiah?
You can't say that.
I can't say that?
No.
Oh, well. Sorry, YouTube. Well, how do you... Okay.
You have to get creative. You just can't hyper everything. You can't make everything about sex, right?
Well, and that's what those fundies do, though.
Right.
Everything is about that.
It is.
I believe Todd thinks they are talking about the Duggars.
And everything that he did was about that. I was looking through a lot of our old talks, and it was either give us money,
Yeah, cash out your 401k.
cash out your 401k so we can
I
build a church.
build a building.
B, I'm jealous of people that have big churches because I don't have one. The other talks, he always talks about
I
that.
know, obviously, I think that speaks to something,
And
something else.
then he would always talk about marriage. He would say that men need sex, and it's a woman's duty to give sex to their man because that's the only way a man connects with his wife. Seriously. And that's what the fundies say. So I'm telling you, we were getting fundy doctrine packaged in a bow to look like it was modern, and it was not modern at all.
Well, yeah.
Wait. In the other video you claimed it was Pentecostal teachings wrapped in modern disguise. Today you are setting the fundamental survival narrative. Wow.
I
I don't even know what to say because I don't want to.
Well,
I don't want to get your channel in trouble, but yeah, I told Katie this the other day that I went into it kind of with my BS meter. It was pretty high, and I mean I'll admit when I first started going there, I kind of liked it just because we were in such a horrible state of mind.
Yes.
That
This next bit is quite important. Please do take note of Catherine's reaction.
and the pastor and this is where I think this is where Katie uses, it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but she uses the word cult to describe this church because this is where Katie uses, it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but she uses the word cult to describe this church because this is where Katie uses, it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but she uses the word cult to describe this church because
Interesting.
I've always kind of pictured him as a kid, like standing in front of the mirror and telling
he would
jokes.
the reason why I called him like that was because he had a lot of the characteristics of a charismatic cult leader.
I agree. But what I'm saying is, so the way that he sort of structured his talks, or whatever you want to call it, on Sundays was...
Well, quite the contradictions, no? Part 3 is particularly interesting, and will set the stage for my upcoming Part 4. I should like to once again thank Suzanne Tickermeyer for her assistance in creating this next chapter. Welcome to Part 3 of Katie and the Cult. My dear viewers, Part 3 is far different than the first two parts. However, Part 1 and 2 were crucial to aiding you in the absorption of this final chapter of my deep dive into the allegation that Catherine Joy survived a religious cult. In this segment, we will navigate in portions separated by topic. We are going to explore the contradictions based on the timeline that Catherine gave and both of her cult videos, followed by an exploration and comparison of Catherine Joy's story from the first video, and the story of her former colleague at Patheos. And given many of you are driving me absolutely bonkers to do another Catherine, is this your format production? This will indeed be that type of video. Let us begin.
We've always sort of felt like interlopers since we've moved here.
Yeah, we don't belong.
I think Katie's talked about it before on the streams, but
We don't belong here at all.
yeah, it was we were just kind of, I don't know, just kind of searching for some sort of belonging.
Yes, community.
I should like to read a portion of an article written by Catherine Joy on 23rd of August 2018 titled, "When I Was on the Verge of Becoming an Alcoholic." Our neighborhood made binge drinking easy and accessible. We moved to a small town in 2013. Neighbors had parties and bonfires in the summers. Adults sat around the fire binge drinking until the early hours of the morning. No one talked about the effect the drinking might have on our kids. Adulting and socializing meant we all got to drink and get tipsy together. The following morning I would wake up with a killer hangover. Instantly, I felt stupid for drinking so much the night before. My son needed me to be at my best, and I could barely function. My husband's temper was short-fused. Both of us walked like zombies through the weekend. Our son may not have understood why we didn't feel right, but he knew that something wasn't right.
And I'm making bone broth because I'm scared of all of the chemicals, and suddenly we're questioning medicine, and everything that I had once been so steadfast knowing that was okay, I suddenly found myself like in an alternate universe.
Catherine, is this you? On the eve of Christmas 2017 you wrote this: Merry Christmas to all of our Christian friends. Today our family celebrates the birth of our Savior, Jesus Christ, and we are reminded of God's grace. He's shown us that despite tremendous obstacles with Von, that He always shows us the way. Some people call it mother's intuition, but I call it the Holy Spirit. I am guided and nudged constantly to help Von. I seek out things I never knew before, and while I've gone down some wrong paths, I found the way to Von's diagnosis. We never expected answered prayers, but we prayed mercilessly for an answer for Von. Our faith kept us grounded and gave us hope despite our bleak outlook. Finally, in December our prayers were answered. Von's disease was discovered and surgery was done. I am a firm believer that God gives us modern medicine as a tool. With His help, Von has renewed life, better health, and a more vibrant personality. As Matthew 19:26 says, with God all things are possible. Our lives are possible because Christ was born and saved us. And He's helped us help Von. God has big plans for Von, and I can't wait to see them. We wish all of you a warm and Merry Christmas. May your hearts be filled with Christ's love, and may you remember today that no matter what, all things are possible.
All I remember wanting was community, and I suddenly was like so deep into something that I didn't even know what it was. And the only friends that I had anymore were within the church, and they were like, yes, just hang out with your friends. Yes, just hang out with us. Make your community here. Don't worry about the outside world. Your family is here. And
Catherine, is this you? In April of 2015 you took a trip to meet up with the online mummy group that you would later piss right the fuck off. After alleged fraudulent fundraisers. Catherine, is this you? While still heavily involved in the church, you took a family vacation to Faith's Lodge, a non-church related getaway tailored to parents of special needs children. Faith's Lodge was an amazing retreat. We went as a group and met another family. We talked, laughed, painted, played cards, had therapy with a counselor, the kids played, didn't sleep, and made new friends. I'm blessed to have these ladies as the best friends I never wanted to have.
Catholic Church, it's very, they have the Catholic charities. So when he said that, I started to look inward, and I thought, oh my God, there is nothing going on here. Like, what are we doing? And then when family members or people were struggling, I noticed that within the community that nobody was helping these people. So when a member of the church was struggling financially or something, the church wasn't offering to help them, or if they did, it was very minimal.
Catherine, is this you? I love when friends take care of my heart when I cannot. Thank you to my church friends for going above and beyond this week. Happy Easter from one tired and grateful boy. Balloons courtesy of our church friends who surprised Von. Our friends M, Spencer, Jack, and Philly all wore shirts to support Von. M also made a beautiful blanket for Von. We are so blessed to have such a great church family. Thank you, guys. Suzanne Tickermeyer is a former member of the Quiverful Church. For many years she has written about her experience. She has also shared much of this with Catherine Joy, who is a former colleague as well as someone who communicated with her quite often on the topic. When Suzanne saw my part 1 video, she referred me to her own video, which is the story of her experience in the church. Well, some may say this video was uploaded after Catherine Joy, the replica of the story, and much greater detail has been written by Suzanne years prior. I should like to show you some clips from both videos.
Or if you're watching, you or Ian or Andy, I'm waving, because I know you sometimes will watch my feeds. My youngest child, 6 weeks to the day after the flood, got very ill. And about 3 months later, I did. But what happened with her is her platelets started dying, and nobody had any idea why. I had her UVA over and over and over. She'd have a week in the hospital, 2 days out, back in the hospital for another week. It was a really stressful time. Between having to throw away inventory and clean out the muck of the store that was flooded, that was bad and depressing enough, particularly if you add in the fact that I'd just gotten a deli order and ice cream order to the tune of like $6,000, and I had to throw it all away. It was just one of the most depressing times you could imagine. I had people in the community that were angry at me because I actually had to shut down the store at one point to take her to the hospital. It was that bad. So I'm laboring under this horrible stress. And my husband has this friend, I'm going to call him Tom Smith, because that's what I call him on NLQ, on No Longer Quivering. Tom went to this church he was always trying to get us to go to, and we'd gone to it a couple times, and I kept telling Gianna, I says, they're like Stepford people. They are all smiley and weird, and I just don't want any part of that.
And then my husband's mother got sick, and then my uncle got sick, and then our family got really rattled by my son's health. And I ended up feeling very vulnerable and very alone. We had just moved to this like sort of rural community. And so I, maybe indirectly dealing with the grief of what was going on in my family and with my son, was seeking something. I needed a community. I needed something. I needed a place to go. You know, one of my friends told me about this place, said, check this out. I went onto the website. Everything looked very different.
So I'd already been to this church. Well, Tom came around, and I was trying to get a hold of Jim that very first time that I was taking Laura to the hospital to say, I'm on my way to UVA right now. They're telling me that our daughter likely has leukemia. Well, it was not leukemia, thank God. It was ITP, idiopathic thrombocytopenia. I think that's how it's pronounced. So she was really sick for a long time. During her really sick for a long time thing, what happened was Tom Smith and the members of the church came alongside me and started love bombing me. Now, if you've ever been part of a CULT, you'll know what love bombing is. Basically, what happens is they find you when you're your most emotionally vulnerable place, and they just pour love, acceptance, whatever on you until you crumble and join. That's kind of what love bombing is.
And feeling like deceived because I realized I had been love bombed. I had been brought into a situation at my most vulnerable point and sort of suffocated by the affection and the attention, told that I was going to have all of these things. And then when I got in there and I realized and started questioning, I soon realized that nothing was as it seemed.
That was going on. They were all love bombing me. And I eventually sort of joined the church. And so did Jim. And they were so nice to me. They were so loving and so understanding. What could I do? But so I joined. And at first, it seemed like just a really good, nice country church. Hey, Rena Roo, where everybody knew each other and everybody loved one another. The pastor seemed sweet. There was not a hint that there was toxic anything going on. And I'm not sure how toxic level it was at that point anyway. So I joined.
And I sat through my first service and I cried because it had been such a long time since I'd been in any sort of church. And I remember feeling guilty because that's what you do when you're Catholic. And I remember feeling like I want to have this feeling again. I just want to keep having that feeling. I don't know that I wanted to believe. I just wanted to have that feeling because I felt so alone for such a long time. And suddenly I found myself invested and involved in this group. I didn't know anything about their doctrine, very limited. I mean, their website was it gave you enough without giving you much. And that's how a lot of these websites and a lot of these sort of rock band churches work, where you feel like you're walking into a modern place where there's modern thoughts and modern feelings. And
with our 4-year-old daughter who was having health issues. I joined with our 7-year-old son and my husband. And my husband had been agitating off and on for years for us to go to church, and we'd go for a while and not go to different churches. So I just thought this was just more of the same. We were just coming here for a while. But I got so sick that we sold the store and started going to things like women's Bible study. I started fully participating. Jim sort of participated, but he didn't participate at the level that I was participating in. And there were a few little red flags all the way from the beginning.
I got really invested, and I was going to groups all the time, and I was going to women's groups and Bible studies and home churches, and I was volunteering. And initially, what it looked like on the surface was a group of people that were in life together, doing life together, helping people, supporting one another. Ministry studies at all. He didn't have a very good theological background. He had somehow built this church based on what he had learned because his father was a pastor in the Pentecostal church, and taken that charisma that's a part of the church and turned it into a modern day rock show that was packaging fundamental beliefs behind this bow of acceptance.
Catherine wrote this article, 29th of December 2017, titled Why I Am Bitter and Jealous as a Special Needs Mum. Within weeks of when she alleged to have left the abusive and manipulative church. First, she writes this on reflection of her feelings toward other mums at the church. When I'm running on fumes, I find that most days my emotions are all over the place. On the hard days, and there are many, my feelings and my thoughts go to places that I hate to admit. I find myself having thoughts of anger, jealousy, and resentment toward parents of children that are healthy. His health is so complex, and I feel totally cheated of a healthy child. I feel bad he has had to walk this very difficult road, and I'm angry that he has had to suffer so incredibly much in such a short amount of time. These are the days it is the hardest for me to listen to parents of healthy children complain or vent about their emergencies with their children. On my tough days, I find myself rolling my eyes, muttering under my breath, and feeling complete detest for their complaints. I listen as they talk about bumps, bruises, 2-hour trips to the ear infections, or strep throat, and I wonder if they realize how incredibly lucky they are that this is what is hard in their lives. The anger builds up in my chest, and I think about the month-long stays at the hospital, the sea of doctors that are on our team, and the cabinet full of medicine I have to keep my son alive. While her feelings are quite valid, the purpose of this would be what she goes on to say. You see, by the advice of her terrible pastor, she was attending outside therapy, as well as counseling with the evil rock star. Here is what she says of her pastor. Here are a few things I have learned with help from my therapist and my pastor. It's okay to feel what you do. Grief, jealousy, and anger are natural reactions and emotions. It's okay to acknowledge your grief and pain. It's not okay to project your anger or pain onto a friend or family member. It's not okay to minimize others' suffering because everyone suffers. Remember, life is about perspective, and we all have different views on what is hard for us. When in doubt, fake it. Be happy even if you can't bite your tongue. If you can't say anything nice, take a deep breath and remember that these feelings and emotions will pass no matter what. Remember that part of this journey is that you will have ugly emotions. There is no shame in admitting you have these feelings. To move forward, try to remember that the only way ahead is to move past those feelings. Staying stuck in grief and anger will only make you angry and depressed. Reach out to friends, family, or to professional counselors to work through these feelings. No matter what, always remember your best today will be your best today, and give yourself the grace you deserve to make mistakes.
And I know this because of the puppet ministry thing that we did, that we picked up from them. So there was no one ministry theology they were following. They were kind of making it up as they went along. Some people there were hardcore Vision Forum followers. There were people that were big supporters of Mike and Debbie Pearl in there To Train Up a Child, Beat Your Kid Silly book. There were people that followed Vonnie Baltram and those guys. There were others that followed other ministries. So there was none of these ministries, ATI, Bill Gothard, all that. None of that was actually part of our church, but various people followed these ministries and brought parts of it into the church.
What next, right? And you start becoming part of this machine, and you're slowly separating yourself from everyone around you. And then you've got a pastor that has no accountability. There's no denomination around him, no rules. He kicks out the other pastor, and then drunk on power, anytime one of the members says to him, what about these? Could you do something different here? Could we add services here? Or could we do this? Or could we do that? It was always met by, if this is not how you like it, you can leave. This is my church, and this is what we're going to do.
So here I am trying to be submissive to my husband, trying to be honoring to my pastor in my church. I came off that platform. My husband was there. He was on his way to the Methodist church and said, look, I'm coming with you to the Methodist church. This is going to be my last Sunday here. Can you stay for the service? And then afterwards we can get the pastor to release us. So he stayed. He stayed for me that time. We got to the end. We went to the pastor. We approached the pastor and said, look, this was our last Sunday at church. We're not coming back. We're not coming back. And he got very nasty with us. He got nasty with me. He said, I refuse to release you. I refuse to release you and send you off with a prayer. I refuse that. Fortunately for us, a dear sweet friend who was also a pastor, but was not the pastor of that church, he overheard this and said, come here, let me pray for you. And that's what he did.
And I remember the morning I woke up and I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, and I couldn't believe that I got involved in this. Because I realized that all the friends I made, I started voicing my concerns, and some of them shared the same things, but they weren't going to leave. Others did leave because it started getting weirder and weirder. But I remember this sort of come to realization with my husband, and I said, I can't do this anymore. We were 3 years in, we were thousands of dollars of donations and tithing and hours of sweat and tears of volunteering. And I remember saying to him, I think we're like in a cult. And it was the craziest experience. Like I left, we left.
And he prayed for us and did the whole, I'm releasing you from this church thing. Releasing us from the theology that says my husband's always right. He released us from the theology that said, beat your children. He released us from all the toxic thoughts that doctors were evil, the whole 9 yards. The next week, I went with my husband to the Methodist church in town. Oh, thank you. I have lots of strays. I have lots and lots of strays. That's my ministry now. I feed stray cats. So we left. The next week, I was at the Methodist church. They had just started, not a month before, a contemporary worship service. So that's the one we went to. I met various people. I met people that had been badly damaged by the local Almolar Baptist church plant. I met people from all sorts of fundamentalist churches who'd been hurt, who were there because of that. There was a small group of us, maybe 20. And I joined the brand new worship team. We joined the brand new service, and way we went. But it gets way worse than that. I thought I was done with it, but I thought I could still have friends there. My mistake. That was just the beginning of the end. What happened was, where we were living was a small southern town, of course, in Virginia, and word spread. Once word spread that we had left, we were apostates now and unbelievers because we were going to church with the Methodists with the homosexual abortionists. It's really what they thought, because the Methodist church at that time had they had a saying that was open hearts, open hands. And I know so many people that came out of the most toxic fundamentalist churches in that area that ended up at our service, including a few pastors out of those very fundamentalist churches. So for me, it turned into a torture sometime. Nobody said a thing to my husband. But whenever I went out in public in my small southern town, I'd run into somebody. They may not have been in my home church, but they were one of the other churches that were loosely affiliated with it, and say, I heard you turn your back on Jesus. You're apostate now.
Left. And it wasn't like we had to flee for our lives, but we lost everything. It was insane. We had become isolated from all of our outside friends because we had ingrained and sculpted our life around these group of people, assuming that if we left, it wouldn't be a big deal. These people would still be our friends. We had spent so much time with them. They were going to be there for us. That's what this was about, right? Wrong.
And I'd have to say, no, I'm not. What happened was my husband wanted to go to the Methodist church and I followed him. Aren't I supposed to be submissive to his wishes? What I finally started doing was I did the Jesus. You've ever noticed when Jesus ran across anybody that was opposing his theology, a lot of times he would ask questions. Asking questions was a technique I learned during my Stevens ministry training. So somebody would run up and ask me a question. So I say, I heard you were this, and this. And, well, who told you that? And then they tell me, I said, why would they say such a thing? And I just kept on going and going and going, and it shut them up. It finally silenced my critics totally. I had 2 years of this almost daily, running into people who were saying things to me in my small town. I cried every single day for 2 long years before I managed to get a hold of myself and go, guess what? No.
When we finally left, it was very quiet, but it was also very loud because the people around us noticed. And when I tried to speak out on social media, I was met with a lot of pushback. A lot of people blocked me. A lot of people told me I was lying when I made statements about the financials or about the leadership or about the doctrine or just about the overall community. It was like I was lying, and soon we had no friends. Everything that I had once held dear to me, because the pastors said you don't need college education, you don't need public schools, women, you don't need to work out of the home. I quit my job during this time, mind you. Yeah, I did. I became a stay-at-home mom. That was never my plan.
Please recall that they joined the church in 2015. Now, ears open to this portion of the same blog Catherine shared on moving into their home, and alcoholism. My husband and I always enjoyed sharing a bottle of full-bodied red wine. Cabernets and spicy Spanish reds were our favorites. When we built a home in 2013, we added a wet bar in our basement. The bar included racks for wine. I looked forward to collecting and storing wine. I envisioned us drinking moderately. Our lives were stressful. My husband's full-time job gave him anxiety. A glass or two of wine helped him unwind. I left my job to care for our son. My son's care exhausted me. At night, the only way I imagined letting go of my stress was by reaching for a glass of wine. My dear viewers, do expect part 4 in the coming weeks, as new archives have become available, as well as recent contradictions. I feel it is important for Catherine to be truthful and transparent as to her true intentions. And, since she will not, I shall take on the task of showing the false pretenses to which she is fighting this cult. Cheers.